at this point in time. That has been rescheduled for tomorrow at noon. So as a heads up for the committee, I would note that the agency's request for both fiscal year 25 and 26, as is reflected in the budget summary, the Legislative Budget Committee made no changes to that. With that being said, the State Fair does have an enhancement request of $2 million for an emergency command center that Brian did discuss with you all during his time with committee. I believe that was yesterday. And so that is also not what you will not see that in your budget summary, again, because that was submitted after the budgets were submitted to Division of the Budget and Legislative Research. Madam Chair, I can stand, excuse me, for any questions that the committee may have. I would note, though, as well, that it is that point in time now. The previous budgets that the committee has heard, there have been no changes from what the Legislative Budget Committee recommended versus what was in the governor's recommendation, and that is the same here, Madam Chair, with the State Fair. So I can stand for questions or, yeah, whatever direction, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Luke. Any questions for Luke on 25 and 26 budgets? Seeing none, let's open a discussion on the enhancement request by the Kansas State Fair. Committee? Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to move to fund the enhancement request for the State Fair budget, $750,000, to be used towards the Emergency Command Center for FY26.
You've heard the motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Roth. Discussion, committee.
I guess.
Representative Carlin.
I'm needing some more information about this facility that they're wanting to create, and I understand the need, but I don't understand the scope of the project and why it might be $2 million to build this facility, and I don't know if we can ask the...
Thank you, Representative Carlin. Brian, would you mind coming and answering a few questions? Brian Schultz with the Kansas State Fair.
Madam Chair, member of the committee, I'm open for any questions you might have.
I've been in these facilities in emergencies as an elected official, and I guess I just need you to tell us a little bit more about who would go into the facility. You did go through it pretty quickly, and we are always rushing. But how big a facility? $2 million seems big for something that's basically, is it underground? And how is it safer than what we already have? And how many people could fit in it in an emergency? I just don't have that information.
Sure. So, Madam Chair, Representative Carlin, this facility will be roughly about 4,000 square feet, and it'll be above ground. It'll be all cinder block made, so we'll be able to withstand weather. The format of it, if you remember from, or if you still have the handout that I presented the other day to you, if you go to one of the back pages, there's actually a layout of what the building would look like. It's divided into two areas. One of them will be for the Kansas Highway Patrol. This will become their new offices year-round, and also VIN inspection will be placed in there. On the other half will be our actual emergency command center, which will have areas for several dispatchers, one including the Reno County dispatcher, and the other one would be the Kansas Highway Patrol dispatch. This would give us an opportunity during fair time, if anything would happen, where we could congregate. We're estimating on either side we could get about 50 to 75 people in there. This will be located on the corner of 20th Street and Main Avenue, on the corner of the State Fairgrounds.
If I may, so if I clarified, this is for the personnel that will guide the EMS, yes?
Right.
Yeah.
So those involved that will be located within this building, not only, well, mainly during fair time, but it could be other potential disasters, would be our EMS, would be Highway Patrol, would be the Hutchinson Police Department, Fire Department, Sheriff's Department. We'd also have a representative from the Hutchinson Regional Hospital there. We would potentially have somebody from KDOC because we do have several residents on the ground, well, 60 to 80 residents on the grounds during fair time. So this would be a place where we could all be together. Because currently on the fairgrounds, we don't have a location. If we were to ever have a mass issue, we would have no place to come together. We'd have to go about 15 minutes to the south of the fairgrounds and meet in the fire station's command center.
Would all of those other people be on the fairgrounds at that time, or would they have to come from all over the county to get to the center?
No, they would be there because they're there right now. We've just got them stationed in lots of different places. The Highway Patrol brings in a very small command center that maybe could fit 6 to 8 people. EMS has got a small support trailer on the grounds, and then they use our first aid station. We're not all in the same building. So if something would happen where we needed to talk, come up with a plan, where are we going next, we don't have a place for that. This would also have a whole wall of TV screens that would have all of our cameras there, so we could be watching play-by-play as well.
I actually grew up on a farm that's the size of the fairgrounds. And that's a long ways to go from wherever I might be to that facility on the corner. Is there any way it could be located centrally?
The problem with having it centrally, Representative, is that if we need to get people in there immediately, you're going to be fighting people trying to get out. So you always, and I've traveled all over the country with fairs looking at their emergency command centers, and they're normally set on the outer banks of the grounds, because then you have easy ingress versus trying to fight the traffic trying to get out. And in this center, having the Highway Patrol in the other half of it, we'd have the vast majority of them there. It would be a matter of getting somebody from EMS. The fire station is just a block north, so they'd be able to get in there. Police and all those would be able to. It's an easier ingress.
I see. Okay. Well, this does help. And yes, and I look at this and I have a lot of notes here, but a lot of water's run under the bridge, if you know what I mean, since you were here. And I didn't look at this morning, but I got to wondering myself if we had enough information to approve this or not. And thank you for your information. I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, we also meet as a committee, an Emergency Operations Committee. We start here in February and we meet every other month up until we get to June, and then we start going every month, and we start planning for any potential issue that could happen on the grounds. We also work with the Department of Homeland Security. They've done some major assessments on our grounds, how we can improve access, ingress, and egress. So we get together quite often. This would also give us a space to be working out of.
Any other, Representative Curtis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So will the command center just be operational just during the time that the fair's operating, or is this a year-round? Will there be people utilizing it year-round?
Madam Chair, Representative, this will be a year-round facility for the Highway Patrol, because currently they're located in our building, and they are in a room probably this big. And then, like I said, the VIN inspection would move out over there as well. So the building would be used year-round. And if there would be an incident on the grounds, we would up it right there instead of having to move somewhere else.
And then, Madam Chair, if I may, do those agencies also have any cost share in the facility since they're co-locating there?
We are, Madam Chair, Representative, we are in the process right now of working with them to try. We met with Captain Edna Murphy today with the Highway Patrol, and she had told us about some ECC grants that are coming around, and we're going to be working with the Highway Patrol to write those grants to help offset the additional costs. Originally, this whole project is $2.5 million. When you start looking at the infrastructure, everything else that goes into it, all the technology, that's where the price goes up so high. and the concrete structure that has to be made.
And then, Madam Chair, I just have one other question. Was the motion that was made, was that to fund the $2 million request? Or, I'm sorry,
750,000.
750,000?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is going to be coming in off Main Street in Hutchinson. So the involvement of the county and the city in this, I mean, we went through this with the fire station to have them on the fairgrounds and so on. And so I'm just looking at partnerships with the host community. What is their either skin in the game or their participation, if anything, in this?
Madam Chair, Representative, we are in the process, excuse me, of working with them and telling them that they need to step up to the table to help fund this program. We know that with the $2.5 million is what it's going to cost. They need to step up and get more involved in it.
Madam Chair, may I? So the 750, if that is approved and goes through the process, what does that do to move this forward?
Madam Chair, Representative, what we will do then is this will be the seed money that we need to, excuse me, take back to the city and the county, as well as start writing grants saying that we do have some monies that we can put in it. This will also move us forward with starting to get some groundwork done on it and continue the fundraising on it.
So can you tell us, I'm trying to figure exactly where this is on Main Street, of where that would be, say, from the fire station now?
Madam Chair, Representative, it is directly south of where the brand new fire station is. It's where the old fire station used to sit. Yeah, right on the corner of 20th and Main Avenue.
That's I thought that's about where it was, wasn't sure. Okay, thank you, Madam Secretary.
Any
or
other
Madam
questions, comments? Representative Long.
Real quick, Brian, so I'm looking at your budget request enhancement, and it looks like you guys received $247,000 from ARPA funds back in, appropriated in '22. So that would be the seed money that started this, right? The 750 would go with the 250.
Madam Chair, Representative, yes, that is exactly right. Yes. That money has been encumbered for architectural fees and things that we can start to get this project rolling.
Thank you, Madam.
Yes.
Okay, any other comments, questions? I have just a couple comments. So as we understand it, you will be reaching out to all the entities that will fall under this project and ask them to get some skin in the game. Everything from KHB, Reno County, EMS, the Hutchinson Fire and Police, KDOC, Sheriff's Department, the Hutchinson Regional Hospital. They all need to know that, you know, it would be nice if they would help out getting this built. Also, just want to make mention that there's almost 500,000 people that travel through the state fairgrounds on a yearly basis. The state fair is actually the highest profile social event in the state. And so I think that gives some credence to the safety that you are seeking with having this command center in place, correct?
Representative, Madam Chair, that's exactly correct. We are considered a soft target through Department of Homeland Security. And what that is that people are constantly coming in to do malicious acts, and we need to be one step ahead of them all the time. That's why we do a lot of the training that we do. That's why we've done the mitigation systems, cameras, lighting, and again, I appreciate all the support that the legislature has given us in the past. This is just going to take us to that next level.
Okay, thank you. I think we're finished. Thanks, Brian. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We've had lively discussion. We're going to vote now, if no one else has anything. All those in favor of adding $750,000 toward the Emergency Command Center, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. We'll add that to our budget.
For 26.
I don't know where the money's going to come from. You tell me, Dylan. SGF for fiscal year 2026. Gotcha. Thank you. And now, is there any discussion on the overall 25-26 budget? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to pass this out. Representative Rogers.
Okay, Madam Chair, thank you. You're doing a good job. I just want to make sure that I understand, this is kind of a new process to make sure what we are approving. I'm saying, are we approving, because it looks like the only enhancements we're doing is this. And
That's correct.
so we had, like, Madam Chair, if I may, in 26, there is add 680,000 for capital improvements, number 3 on page 4 and 5. So, and again, I apologize if I'm, so we're adding nothing else except the baseline other than the $750,000. I just want to make sure that is correct.
Dylan, would you answer that, please? Luke?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Dylan, for the clarification on the previous motion. Madam Chair, to answer the question, if the motion is to approve the state fair's budget as amended, to answer Representative Raj's question, that would be a yes. That would be as presented, including the $750,000 general fund in FY 2026 for the Emergency Command Center. So then essentially if that is what is approved by the committee, the Budget Committee report would say that the Budget Committee concurs with the Legislative Budget Committee in 2025, concurs in 2026 with the addition of $750,000 general fund for the Emergency Command Center. I hope that answers your question, Representative and Madam Chair. Let me know if you need any more clarification or if I wasn't clear.
Thank you, Luke. So basically, with the LBC not making any changes to that capital improvement request in 2026, that is already been accepted by LBC. So the $750K is on top of what we were presented the other day. Clear? Okay, no more discussion. Let's take a vote. All those in favor? We need a motion first, yes. Well, we had a motion and we passed it to add the 750. Now we need a motion to pass the budget. Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will move that we pass out the Kansas State Fair budget for FY 25 and 26 as presented with the addition of $750,000.
Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Representative Carlin. Any discussion? If not, we'll vote. All those in favor of passing out the state fair budget for fiscal year 2025 and 26 as amended, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Okay. Closing that, we're going to move right into an informational hearing about the state water plan with the J. Ramaswamy. Sorry if I got that wrong. So we're going to have the water office immediately following him. So take it away, Vijay.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. This is on. Do you all have a clicker by any chance for the slides? Just want to make sure. Perfect. And I'll just wait for the slides to come up before I get started here, if that's okay. All right, perfect. Well, thank you all so much, and thank you again, Madam Chair. We really appreciate this opportunity to talk about water holistically across the state. As all of you know very well, water touches so many of your communities, touches so many issues, touches so many agencies and so many budgets. And the goal of this presentation is to really just untangle a bit of the complexity of water in Kansas and talk a little bit about the problems that we see across the state. Now, look, I know what you're thinking. He's trying to untangle the complexity and gave us a 50-page PowerPoint and 5 different documents. So I promise I won't go through every single slide here, but we're going to focus our discussion on 3 main questions. The first one is, how is water funded in Kansas? The second one is, what are the state's main water problems? And I'll talk a little bit about the progress we've made so far. Thank you to all of you for the funding that you passed a couple years ago through House Bill 2302. And finally, I'll talk a little bit about how the governor's budget recommendations aim to continue progress on these problems. If I can get the clicker to work. Okay, perfect. Could I just say next slide if that's okay? Okay, perfect. So let's start with how water is funded in Kansas. Next slide. So when we talk about kind of the base of water in Kansas, we're talking about 3 main funds. The first one is the State Water Plan Fund, which I'll go through here in a second, which encompasses the implementation of the Kansas Water Plan. Most of our projects and programs and initiatives go through the State Water Plan Fund. But a couple of years ago, thanks to the work of you all, we passed the House Bill 2302 Infrastructure Grant Funds, which are 2 additional funds, one for technical assistance and one for water projects in your communities. And so when you look at your budgets, you will see these 3 funds, which total about $57 million of kind of base funding when we talk about water. Next slide. The State Water Plan Fund, created in 1989, is our vehicle for the implementation of the Kansas Water Plan. If we go to the next slide here, this is for your reference, but it talks a little bit about how the State Water Plan is funded. So there are original statutory transfers from SGF, from EDIF, but also a collection of fees, which folks from municipal to agricultural to stock water to industrial water users all pay fees into the Water Plan Fund, which total to about $13.5 million. There's also an additional $18 million from House Bill 2302, which you all passed a couple of years ago, that goes into the State Water Plan Fund for our projects and our programs, which sunsets in FY28. Next slide. This gives you a little bit of an understanding of all the different agencies that are involved in the State Water Plan Fund. And I won't go through these specifically, but you can tell that all of these different projects, all of these different priorities are spread across these 5 different agencies, and you'll see that over the course of your budget presentations this year. Next slide. Before I get into the main water problems, I want to talk a little bit about the infrastructure grant programs. This has been an incredible opportunity to learn the demand of water across the state. We know in every single one of your communities, we've gotten applications for infrastructure projects, technical assistance to engineering projects, ways for us to improve water quality, our drinking water systems, wastewater, and really think about the future of communities. We've received over $220 million of requests for just $27 million last year. This year's grant program will be announced here pretty soon, but I want to talk, a little bit about the level of demand that exists kind of across the communities. Next slide. So here you see a map. As you can tell, it's spread across the state, and the demand will only grow. This is kind of our sleeping giant in the state. Water problems will only get more expensive, and we think that good proactive policy, like you all have pushed for years, will ensure that we can make these projects come to life, but also in the most efficient and effective way possible. Next slide. So before I get into the main water problems, one thing that I want to point out that our agencies have focused on, thanks to the leadership of your committee and other committees in the legislature, is show us where the money has gone so far. What have we bought with the dollars that we've already invested? So before I get into these specific water issues and some of our accomplishments, I want to point you to this one-pager, which gives you a little bit of a sense that you all should have of the types of water accomplishments that have happened so far in FY24 and 25 with the additional water funding that you all have passed. Next slide. So our main water problems are derived from an extensive public consultation process taken on by Director Owen and the Kansas Water Office through the Kansas Water Plan, which was updated in 2022. If we go to the next slide, these are our 5 guiding principles: addressing the Ogallala Aquifer, our state's water quality, our securing and protecting our reservoirs, what we're calling kind of resiliency, our ability to mitigate droughts and floods and invest in our infrastructure, and finally, increasing awareness of Kansas water resources. Throughout this presentation, you'll see me use the kind of shorthand you see on the right side just to talk about our budget, but also some of these issues across the state. Next slide. We first start with an issue that all of you know about, which is declining water levels in the Ogallala Aquifer. The key here is it's about communities. We know that there are communities within Western Kansas that don't have enough water for their economies and their populations for the next 25 years, for the next 50 years. I know I've spoken to some of you about communities within your district that are facing real threats when it comes to maintaining their agricultural communities, but also ensuring, like Leota and Sublette, that their residents themselves have enough water moving forward. But it's not too late. The important thing to know for all of you is that the state can invest in irrigation technologies, supporting those communities in purchasing water rights, other ways to invest in the mapping of the aquifer, different strategies to support local conservation efforts to ensure the viability of the aquifer. But the important thing is that we have to invest now. Next slide. One specific thing that I want to point out that we're very excited about, and I know Secretary Beam is here, is that his agency secured a 5-year, $25 million grant from USDA to work with our groundwater management districts to implement different irrigation technologies and provide education to producers. If you look at this bottom right here, I gave you a little screenshot of a checklist that the Kansas Water Office, along with K-State and our irrigation specialists, have created, where if you walk through all of these steps and do a center pivot audit, they've shown that you can save at least 15% on your water use without impacting profitability. And that's key, right? We want to ensure that producers can save money and also reduce water use. And these types of innovations, implementing those into state policy through your investments is going to be critical to address our water issues moving forward. Next slide. The next piece is on water quality. Again, another sleeping giant in the state. All of you know, especially for your small towns, that treating water is expensive. We saw in Lakin, especially in Southwest Kansas, that when they had high uranium concentration and they had to put in a very expensive reverse osmosis facility, it doubled their water bills. That's going to be true across the state moving forward. We just see the level of demand for our infrastructure programs. We know that there's over 150 public water supply systems that are either at risk or above the level for nitrates, which pose a huge significant health risk to babies through blue baby syndrome. So addressing water not only on the infrastructure side, but on the prevention side, preventing nitrates from getting into our groundwater is going to be critical to ensuring that we have the viability of clean drinking water for generations to come. Next slide. One of the things that I want to point out here, and I want to point you to the little kind of grainy photo here, which is actually from Southeast Kansas in 1904, it's an old mining operation, is that we have over 140 contaminated sites in the state where the culprit is no longer in business because it's historical contamination. That contamination falls on the state to address. And so KDHE, I know Director Henning is here, has done a lot of work over the past few years in working with communities to address that contamination, to ensure that our communities, our towns, our cities, our parks have the right quality to move forward. We have to address these contamination sites. We've done a lot of work, but we have more to do. Next slide. To quickly touch on reservoirs, 2/3 of Kansans get their drinking water from our reservoirs, but they're filling up with dirt. Look, we know that sedimentation, or the filling up of those reservoirs with sediment, is a normal process, but it's been accelerated, and that there are many of our reservoirs that are filling up at a significant rate. Tuttle Creek is set to be 90% full by 2070. That can seem like a long way away, but that's our kids, that's our grandkids, right? And if we don't have capacity in those reservoirs, when there's a drought, when we want to grow economically and bring businesses in, we just don't have the capacity to do so. So continuing to address our reservoirs, every single one of them, is going to be very important for the long-term economic growth of the state and ensuring that 2/3 of Kansans get their drinking water. Next slide. I want to thank Director Owen for all the work that they've done to start the water injection dredging pilot this year, but we have to do a lot more in terms of preventing sediment coming in and continuing to address these reservoirs, and you'll see that in the governor's budget. Next slide. Next is resiliency, or the idea of long-term planning and infrastructure investment. We know with communities like Caney that if you don't plan, then you are going to lead to emergencies. And we saw that in Caney. And so states like Texas do long-term planning to say, here's how much water I have, here's how much I need in 50 years, what's that difference, and what projects do I need to invest in to ensure multiple generations of water. Kansas just doesn't do that. And we'll see some investments in this year's budget to get us up to speed. Next slide. Look, we've addressed a lot of high-risk dams. There's over 500 of them across the state. And I want to just point out another piece on the infrastructure side. I know we talked about it today, Representative Bloom, that there are communities that would disappear without this funding. Keats is an example of that. Without the wastewater lagoon, then thanks to KDHE for working with that community on that project, that community, according to their planning director, would have completely disappeared. That's going to be true for more and more communities if we don't take a proactive approach to water issues. Next slide. Finally, I want to just point out on research and education that one thing, if you take anything from this presentation, it is that we need to show return on investment. You are investing dollars as appropriators and legislators. We need to be able to show you through independent evaluations that your dollars are actually reducing water quality concerns and addressing some of these problems that we've talked about. Next slide. And so as we increase awareness of water resources, one of the things that we'll invest in the budget is independent evaluation of our programs to ensure that return on investment moving forward. Next slide. Look, we've done a lot of stakeholder engagement across the state, over 1,500 stakeholders. And I want to just say that the key that we heard is that there's urgency around water issues. That if we don't invest in them now, they will only become more expensive, they will only become emergencies, and they will only become more dire as we move forward. So, being dynamic and accountable with state dollars, being responsive with state dollars to ensure that multiple generations have water, and thinking long-term is going to be critical. Next slide. So how does the budget address these problems? Next slide. I won't spend a ton of time here, but just to give you a sense, this is how much the budget spends, the governor's budget, on each of the major issues that we've talked about, and we'll talk about them more specifically in a second. Next slide. Apart from the numbers, the thing that I want to talk to you guys about the most is a shift that's happened in the state water plan over the past year. Historically, we've looked at a collection of different line items. Now we're thinking more of it as a true investment fund, a true business-like investment fund that's focused on three things: transparency, accountability, and responsiveness. So transparency in where we're spending the money and how those affect problems, accountability in terms of ensuring that our money is actually leading to progress, and you can see that as legislators, and finally responsiveness, that we are listening to communities on what they need. Next slide. So, and I know many of you have seen the implementation framework, and if you go to page 10 whenever you have a second, we have done outcomes for every single one of these areas so that you can see in the next 2 years, what are you going to achieve with the money that you've already allocated, even if we don't get a single dollar more this year. That's the type of thinking that we need to bring to the State Water Plan Fund. So you as legislators can say, hey, these are outcomes that I want to buy more of. Here are things that I maybe want to change, but you can see clearly what we're on track to spend and how those impact your communities. Next slide. So I'm going to just run through these quickly, but this is the type of thinking, right? When we talk about a business mindset, it is to say, here's what you buy with the base budget, and here's what you can buy with the enhancements. So you can see very clearly where the money is going and how it's being spent. So with the base budget, you're getting septic system repairs and private testing in 17 counties, and with the enhancement, you're getting it in 25 counties. Next slide. Same thing with water quantity. Next slide. Same thing with reservoirs. You're seeing what you can get with the base budget and with the ramp up, addressing John Redmond. Next slide. And then same thing with infrastructure. So you can see how many communities would get infrastructure grants with the base funding and with the ramp up funding or the additional funding. Next slide. This is why this is critical, right? So you can see that there are 500 dams across the state and how we're actually making progress to solve problems. So in 5 years and 10 years, you can say, because I've invested this money, I've actually solved a problem. And that's what the thinking that we want to bring to the Water Plan Fund. Next slide. So the difference that you'll see in terms of the structure of the budget is instead of seeing 40 different line items, you will see everything categorized based on these 5 categories related to those problems that we've talked about. Next slide. But when we budget based on those categories, our responsibility for transparency and accountability only increases. And so we're not just going to provide you those 5 different line items. We are still providing you, and if you look at this sheet, a line-by-line list of everything that we're going to spend money on. And you can see how previous line items track onto new spending and the 5 different buckets. I want to thank the Department of Agriculture because they made a very pretty version of this for each of your agencies. So for each agency, you can see for Department of Agriculture, Here's what we spent in FY25, how that maps on to each of these categories, and what we intend to spend in FY26. So you get a clear list of projects, and it allows us to be more transparent with you how money is being spent. Next slide. This is the one pager that I just mentioned. Next slide. Last, I want to just touch on some of the enhancements in the governor's budget. The agencies will go through this in detail, so I won't spend too much time here. But I want to say that the enhancements were focused on three things. One is investing in high demand projects that were requested by Kansans over the past year. We know there's projects with millions of dollars of requests, and we want to ensure that money is going to be spent when it's allocated. Next, there's evaluation of programs to show results for taxpayers. And finally, building that long-term planning. I know Representative Roth, we talked about in your office about the importance of doing long-term planning so you can think about your economy moving forward and invest in the projects that are necessary for your communities. Next slide. This is an overview of the enhancements. Next slide. The governor's budget uses the interest on the budget stabilization fund. You know, we get about $70 million if you look at FY24. We think that this is a good way to fund the enhancements, especially in the next few years as the legislature thinks about long-term funding as it relates to water, to hold SGF separately as we move forward. Next slide. So on water quality, the only thing that I want to point out here is the focus on independent evaluation. So there's $1 million more for the RAPS programs, but that money will be targeted towards one high priority watershed and paired with an evaluation to show results for water quality. Next slide. For water quantity, the two things that I want to point out here are money for the AEM mapping. That's mapping that we've done in Northwest Kansas of the aquifer to kind of see where different levels of the aquifer exist, how much water is in different areas. It's been really helpful to that local community. We know there's high demand from GMD 1 and 3 in Southwest Kansas. An additional $800,000 investment would save us $1 million in contracting costs because we know we want to do it anyway. Next slide. Here, I just want to point out the additional $1.75 million for conservation districts to ensure that they can hire staff and implement that funding. Next slide. As we look at reservoirs, the piece that I want to point out is continuing momentum and progress in addressing reservoirs. John Redmond, which serves over 100,000 Kansans, and the Wolf Creek Generating Station is set to lose 50% of its storage by 2070. That's a huge risk to the state. And so there is a new technology, not the same as Tuttle Creek, but a new technology that the Water Office experts have said would work specifically in John Redmond called hydrosuction that we'd like to invest in to keep progress moving on addressing those reservoir concerns. Next slide. The two pieces I want to point out here are really, really important. When I talked about long-term water supply planning, we have to invest in that at the state level. If you go to the next slide really quickly, states like Texas can tell you, like I mentioned, what are our existing supplies, what are our needs and potential storages, and they can also tell you what is the list of projects for you as legislators that we need to invest in to meet that delta, right? To ensure that we have enough supply now and into the future. If we don't think proactively, these problems are only going to get more expensive, and we think that investment is helpful. To pair with that investment, if you go back to the previous slide, we want to reinstitute a program from the 1990s and early 2000s called the District Engineer Program, which is primarily a support for small communities who don't have the resources to apply for federal grants, who don't have the resources to address their public water supply needs, and don't have the resources to implement efficient regionalization systems that we know are effective in some areas of the state. So these would be local resources for you all and for those communities to prevent emergencies like Caney and ensure that local communities have the resources they need. Next slide. And then the next one. Next one. The last piece that I want to point out is the independent program accountability and evaluation. So there we have $550,000 on the base and an additional money to bring us up to close to $910,000 to conduct that independent review of our programs, track metrics, and ensure we are operating as a true investment fund. Next slide. So that is an overview of the state water plan and some of the governor's investments. The agencies will provide more detail, but I want to leave you with maybe one thought here is that the thing that we heard over and over and over again over the past year is that we want to ensure water for our kids and our grandkids. Our investments at the state level in long-term planning, in addressing infrastructure needs, and making sure that we are supporting local producers in conservation efforts is the way to do that from a state perspective. I want to thank all of you for your leadership over the past few years in getting a lot of that done. Thank you.
Thank you, Vijay. In the interest of time, if anyone has questions, please contact him directly. We need to get going with the budget hearings. So thank you again. Reach out to him if you do have questions. Okay, now we will have the Kansas Water Office. Luke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, Luke Drury with Legislative Research. I do want to point out for the committee that for these particular budgets and some of the other ones we'll hear this week, you'll have a couple of different documentation with you. You will have the budget summary, which is standard that you all have seen before for the Kansas Water Office.
Luke,
On your, yes.
I just made another major error. The Water Office has graciously agreed to go after the Department of Ag because Secretary Beam is unable to be with us tomorrow if we go over into tomorrow. So let's all shift gears and we'll hear from Kansas Department of Ag.
Certainly.
Sorry,
Thank you, Madam
Luke.
Chair. No problem. I still wanted to mention to you all, you have the budget summaries for both Agriculture and Water Office. In addition to that, you will also have a yellow piece of paper. These ones are the governor's differences from the Legislative Budget Committee recommendations. So that's similar to the shorthands that you have seen produced by Legislative Research in the past. In addition to that, you should have a blue sheet that should be front and back, and that is the State Water Plan Fund 2025 session. This is based on the LBC recommendations so far, and then it also has the revenues in there as well, and that is based on current law and revenue estimates. So those are a couple of new sheets that the committee has in addition to the budget summary. So beginning on page 1 for the Kansas Department of Agriculture, as Madam Chair indicated, Secretary Beam is with the committee today and will be able to address the committee and answer any questions that you all may have. This front page is just simply an overview of the agency's request along with the Legislative Budget Committee's recommendations. When you roll down to page 2, I'm scrolling, you all are flipping through your budget summaries. Figure 4 is the budget analysis. And this shows somewhat of a tracking sheet that you can see. And again, those numbers on the far left then correspond with the narratives below. The Department of Agriculture does receive general fund. You will see no reappropriation there. You will see item number 2 is State Water Plan Fund reappropriations. Those items of reappropriations are then enumerated down below on page 2 and carrying over onto page 3. Flipping over to page 3 are supplemental requests. The agency submitted no supplemental requests for FY 2025. Item number 4 is a State Water Plan Fund transfer. The agency's revised request adds about $400,000 State Water Plan Fund in 25. That is related to the Water Office's budget. Traditionally, the Water Office has transferred monies to the Department of Agriculture for the Kansas Reservoir Protection Initiatives. And this request here is for a transfer from the State Water Office to the Department of Agriculture for the sum of about $400,000 in the current year. Item number 5, Water Resources Federal Funds. The agency is estimating about $5.8 million from Federal Cooperating Technical Partner Grant Fund, and that's from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, so FEMA Dam Safety Grant Fund in 2025. This is specifically a federal initiative. Specifically, contractors produce new floodplain maps or convert existing maps into digital formats. The agency estimates $5.8 million federal funds for that initiative for floodplain mapping in 2025. Item number 6 on page 4 is a $5 million add of federal monies for the Technical Assistance Contribution Agreement Fund. Expenditures for that fund are made to help increase conservation practices and implementation to improve soil health on private lands in Kansas. And that is a $5 million add, again, federal fund initiative there in 2025. Item number 7, there's an additional $3.8 million for the Federal Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure Program Fund. So these first several items are federal fund initiatives. For this particular item, the 3.8 million is for contractual services to help create more and better processing options for local and regional producers in 2025. And so far, and I will just note throughout here that the LBC recommends no changes to these items. Item number 8 at the bottom of page 4 and then carries over onto page 5 are other federal funds. The Department of Agriculture utilizes many different federal funds for ranging for a variety of different items that can range from disease prevention and food supply chains to technical assistance for local communities. Aggregated, there's about $1.4 million in expenditures from other federal funds that were not listed above. For the most part, those expenditures are for fees for professional services, $1.4 million from other federal funding sources being added in 2025. Item number 9, which is about in the middle of page 5, is agency fee funds. The agency's revised request does include an increase of just about $1 million from agency fee funds, and that's attributable to salaries and wages. I'll note that that is not salary increases. Rather, the agency has been successful in hiring previously vacant FTEs. And so therefore, in filling those previously vacant FTEs, those expenditures are for those now filled positions. So that's about $1 million in fee funds in 2025. Item number 10 is ARPA funds. The agency's request adds about $600,000 from ARPA. Despite the request showing the add of about $600,000, the agency has roughly $19,000 remaining in ARPA monies in 2025. These monies have already been previously approved, and they indicate that remaining balance will be spent in the current year for training staff to use some defoaming equipment. Item number 3 is an FTE adjustment across all agency programs. There was an addition of 2.2 FTE positions. I will note, Madam Chair, that the LBC did have a global recommendation to delete FTE position adds, and so then you'll see there the deletion of 2.2 FTE positions in 2025, and that is the only adjustment made to the agency's budget for FY 2025. Madam Chair, I can continue on to fiscal year 2026, or I can stand for any questions.
Thank you, Luke. Committee, questions on 25? Seeing none, go ahead with 26, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. FY 2026 analysis is on page 6. Again, I will reference the committee to figure number 7. This particular summary of the budget request is a table that I like to use to help itemize those different items then that correspond with the data entries down below. You will notice that there are a number of enhancement requests. And then, Madam Chair, you will notice then under Legislative Budget Committee, you see those fields are zeros. Again, that is because the Legislative Budget Committee did delete all agency enhancement requests globally. I will still, though, describe those here for the committee down below. Item number 1 are water structure inspections. That enhancement request was for $650,000 general fund, one-time enhancement for the inspection of dams and other structures in 26. Item number 2 is meat and poultry staffing demand. That's about a $350,000 general fund add. The agency indicates that funding for employees in the program has traditionally come from a partnership with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. However, the agency notes that USDA has not met that match for 4 consecutive years. So the agency's enhancement request would essentially supplant the federal funding deficit to continue providing adequate meat and inspection services for local processors. Item number 3, sorghum investment program. That's an add of $1 million as a one-time enhancement for sorghum investment program in 2026. Item number 4, animal health veterinarian. Add $150,000 and 1 FTE position for a veterinarian in Southeast Kansas. Similar to item number 2 listed above, this traditionally has been something USDA has done, or the position is needed to cover services that USDA has been unsuccessfully in filling. Item number 5, general fund allocations. That's on the bottom of page 7. As discussed earlier in committee with other budgets that have been heard, various changes to cost indices regarding group health insurance and CAPERS employer contributions. The committee will likely remember some conversations in regard to other agencies that have additional expenditures for these particular items. Those agencies were not general fund funded, so this SGF allocation here is to pick up those expenditures for some estimated increases in those group health insurance and CAPERS employer contribution rates in 2026. Item number 6 is on page 8. That's a technical assistance contribution agreement. That's a $5 million for a federal initiative. Again, similar to what was discussed earlier in FY 2025, the agency is estimating for that funding to continue into FY 2026. Item number 7, $2.1 million for options for local and regional producers. Again, this item was in the agency's 25 revised budget, and the agency estimates for those expenditures to continue into FY 2026. Item number 8, which is also on page 8, the agency fee funds. Again, similar to the FY 2025 description, the agency has been successful in filling previously unfilled FTE positions. The agency estimates retaining those positions, and so therefore you will see an increase add in expenditures from agency fee funds of about $1 million in 2026. Those all other adjustments include about $800,000, mostly from federal funds, and 2 FTE positions. I would note that these are mostly for contractual service expenditures. Also, though, Madam Chair, I do want to note on page 9, underneath item 9, all other adjustments, you will notice on the State Water Plan Fund table on the blue sheet that you all have provided, you will notice in FY 2024 actuals, 2025 LBC recommendations, you will see a number, excuse me, you will see a number of lines of appropriation. Each one of these lines indicate previously used line item appropriations in the appropriations bill for every water agency across the state. As indicated earlier by Vijay during the conversation on the water plan, there were some conversations on some of those guiding principles. The agency's request does reflect, also include for 2026, consolidating some of those traditional legacy lines of appropriation into the new lines of appropriation that would then fall under those particular buckets: water quality, water quantity aquifer, resiliency, reservoirs, and research and education. Madam Chair, I would also note then for the committee, the reference tables, expenditures by program and FTE positions can be found on page 10 of the budget summary for the Department of Agriculture. I would then also like to note for the committee the yellow sheet for governor's differences from legislative budget committee recommendations. I will note those quickly for the committee. So again, this is a shorthand that compares what the legislative budget committee recommended versus what the governor recommended. You will notice in FY 2025 the addition of 2.2 FTE positions. You will also then notice in 26 of the agency's enhancement requests, the one that was approved by the governor is the meat and poultry staffing demand. In addition to that, the governor did include a proviso on that funding to indicate that that money would be approved pending federal action if meat and poultry inspections in the federal farm bill passes to provide funding for such. That $350,000 would be lapsed. I would also note state water plan fund enhancements. There's an additional $9.4 million in state water plan fund expenditures listed out there by lines of appropriation for the new lines of appropriation. And then finally, Madam Chair, and I apologize, I don't believe the committee's document has the 2.2 FTE positions in 2026, but that 2.2 was in 25 and in 26, and the governor does recommend adding those in 2026. Madam Chair, I'd be happy to stand for questions from the committee, or as indicated earlier, Secretary Beam is with us today, and he can certainly address the committee as well.
Thank you, Luke. Questions of Luke? If not, Secretary Beam, welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. You should have a document that looks similar to this, but to start out, I am Mike Beam. I have the pleasure of serving as your Secretary of Agriculture. I get to work with a great industry and a great team at our agency. And they are the ones who put this, whoops. It's a trick. So they're the ones who put this together. So as we go through, if you have questions, if I can't handle it, if you may, let me defer to them. We can get you one. Oh, there they are. So did we put the supply on the back desk? Don't let me touch it.
I will sit right there. How about that? I'll just give it to you.
Okay, my apologies. I think we're going to pass those around. I'm not going to use these slides. Is that going to show up in slides? Okay. I'll probably not, unless I have a question about that page. So again, good afternoon. I'm just going to make some comments overarching in regards to our budget. But first I would say that I think all of you know that the Department of Ag is really a diverse organization. We have 15 programs in 6 divisions, and then we handle issues and regulatory aspects that not only have farmers and ranchers, but agricultural businesses, restaurants, food establishments, and basically consumers on a daily basis. From water appropriation to animal health, disease traceability, to food safety. Overall, we employ 355 individuals across the state. 189 of those are field staff that live out in your communities. And I might add, those 355 individuals compares to 377 to 380 from the time frame of 2016 to 2020. I just thought I'd make sure that you realize that we're operating with fewer than we have historically. Just some of the budget highlights for adjusted 25. A request of $102.5 million, and FY26, $71.5 million. You'll see, most of the agency is funded through statutorily appropriated funds, being the State Water Plan Fund, EDIF, fee funds, federal funds. Just over $17.3 million of our total budget comes from State General Fund as we look at the FY26. That's an increase of $2.2 million. But due to the governor's budget recommendation. And it's also the full impact of the enhancement that we received for our engineering spots in our water division of water resources that just finally kind of went into effect in FY25. But the State General Fund overall is about 24% of our overall budget. Our budget document includes the enhancements the agency requested and the governor approved. So I might want to add that, well, I'll come to that. I'm going to come to back to that in a second. So other key points I think I would like to mention is 43.4% of our expenditures are related to salary and wages for FY26, based on the 71.5 million. Salaries have gone up, but we're fortunate and thankful for the legislature has approved statewide enhancements that's allowed us to retain and fill position, and especially for our Division of Water Resources, which takes a fairly high competency to fill those roles. Our grants, they change, they come and go based on the federal programs. And then, as mentioned, the fee for professional services takes a lot of variation. It's based on how many communities that we're working with on our floodplain mapping with the grants from FEMA. So I want to make it clear that we're not asking for an increase in FTEs. Any comparison to the FTE count is simply a snapshot at a single point in time. In regards to the governor's budget recommendations, so the governor did include state general fund recommendation that we made of additional $350,000 in FY26 for the meat and poultry program. Why? That program is to be a 50-50 program, half state, half federal. And for many, many years, that's been funded in the state by state general funds. They, however, have been unable or have chose not to fulfill for budget cuts the half or 50%. So we've asked to make that up with the $350,000, and there is proviso that if they do come forward with it, then that state authority would lapse. I would also mention that it was one of our initial enhancement requests was for, I think, $150,000 for a veterinarian. We withdrew that request right before the governor worked on the budget. So technically it's listed as an enhancement. We withdrew that because USDA APHIS did fill the position in Southeast Kansas. So that is one of the reasons that's not included. The governor did include the $1 million for Center for Sorghum Improvement. That's a one-time match, and I think what's important to note is that's to be matched with national checkoff dollars that producers pay, state checkoff dollars that producers pay, and Kansas State University and some private funds. And that will be a 10-year project to enhance the research of sorghum. We asked for one-time $650,000 for water structures inspection funding. Representative Roth, yesterday we had some dialogue about the number of dams, and I apologize for if I said 500. I looked it up. We have 6,154 dams. According to a 2018 survey, 2,517 are actually those to be regulated by the state. 258 of them are high hazard dams and 170 significant hazard dams. And these significant and high hazard dams are to be inspected every 5 years. And it's the responsibility of the dam owners to do that. However, those are fairly expensive, and you'll see we've actually introduced a bill to start a fee structure that would help provide the funding. But we believe we should get on this, and so that's why with the $650,000 request, we can contract out to those engineering firms that can go ahead and get started on doing the inspection of those dams. The governor's initiatives regarding water extend beyond our request, so that's why there's a little discrepancy in the budget, or at least what we provided. The increase of $9.3 million for FY26 does include the water structures money and then the sorghum that I mentioned earlier. Some key changes include an additional funding for irrigation technology, additional funding for aid to conservation districts, crop and livestock research, and dam construction. One note that was mentioned is that previously our Division of Conservation staff administered the Reservoir Protection Program, but the money was transferred from the Water Office, and so this change would put that money in our Division of Conservation. And I think that it just goes to show that we have that strong collaboration between the Water Office when we go ahead and carry out those programs. So maybe I should just pause at this point, Madam Chair, and see if you have any questions that I can respond to and or my staff. And I might mention, when you look at this document, you can go program by program and you can see our performance-based budget process. And what I think is important, in each of those programs, there's a little box that says statutory authority. Most what we do has been assigned to us by the Kansas Legislature since the agency was created. So I just thought that might be of interest as you consider all the things that we do. But I'd be happy to try to respond to any questions.
Thank you, Secretary Beam. Questions of the committee? Representative Rogers?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll do my best to not drone on, but water people have nothing else to do to come back the whole rest of the week, huh? No. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. And I guess I'll just start. The meat and poultry staffing, the 350, that would be, so you run that program for under $1 million? And is that, okay, okay.
It should be.
Yeah, you add 350, and that's been, the feds have not paid. Now, that's their part to pay for the state inspected, correct?
Correct.
Because USDA has its own deal. This is just USDA helping to cover the cost for state inspected.
Yes, right.
Right?
Right.
Okay.
It's not the large plants that are federal inspected. It's those that choose to be state inspected. And long ago, this was set up, and I think it was a policy at the federal level that will support, if state programs adhere to certain standards, we'll provide that because that's a service feds don't have to provide.
Madam Chair, but if I understand right, if the feds would do their part, then
We wouldn't be asking for the 350.
you wouldn't be yeah, okay. I thought
And
that
that's
was.
why the proviso's in. If for some reason it
Right.
comes forward, that authority would lapse.
Okay. The other thing I have, and this is probably own personal, trying to figure out performance-based budgeting and those things. I understand we put that back in there to do, but as we go out of this committee and go into the larger appropriations committee to defend that, every agency has a different way they grab something. And so I'm looking at food safety and lodging, Madam Chair, if you don't mind.
Is there a page number? for
Yeah,
that
it'd be
we can-
page, this is in the departments, okay. It's about halfway through, or we can pick any, I guess I really don't care.
Got food safety and lodging.
But
right here.
because what you're doing, I think, is probably the better, because you're putting a dollar amount in all these instead of just an arbitrary, we do, but as far as to try to find some sort of a statistic of seeing a performance. But what I guess, and this is not necessarily a knock, I'm trying to find out if you understand the process, because I'm not sure if we all understand exactly what we want. But by going through here, like priority one, helping the customer succeed and help grow the Kansas economy by serving and producing safe products, I guess maybe this isn't an analysis, but it's numbers. And so how does that tell us as appropriators that things are working?
Well, the intent is, and this was started before I came on, the intent is of the duties and roles of the program, which do we consider first priority if we'd have a major funding lapse? So in that case, food safety and lodging inspections would be our first priority. It's also the most expensive, but the training of staff would be second priority, and then outreach to customers would be third.
And, Madam Chair, my point, Mr. Secretary, is I'm not saying you're wrong, but I think the reason why we wanted to continue to do this and do a little deeper as we take the broad range of legislators to figure out this is better than some, but it still doesn't, what you're doing is the way you see it as where our priorities are, and then based on the budget dollars, rather than are you meeting attainable goals, which, it's more of a blanket statement, but,
So we actually have goals and objectives by program. That's not really reflected here, but what are the priorities? What's the matrix that are expected?
so
to
that
meet?
does happen.
That does happen.
Okay, again, I'm just, because what we end up saying is whatever you present, and I'm not saying this is wrong by any means, I'm just, it's frustrating because every agency comes with a different way of doing things, and that's fine.
There's a better way, we'd be glad to look at it.
I wish, the better way is starting over, I think, but that's my own opinion, because it takes your staff time to put these things together, and what point does it prove? Other than you spend a couple of days putting the numbers together. That's just my frustration, Madam Chair.
There's a lot of work that went into this. I'm proud of it.
Right, no,
Yeah.
I'm not saying, as you should be, but you understand what I'm saying based on that small part of it, and if it's gonna be discounted by others, that's what and I'm not trying to pick on you, I do that in a full appropriations as well, trying to figure out, the value of what you're doing, that's all.
Representative Curtis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Secretary Beam, for being here today. I appreciate that and appreciate your presentation. I don't have a lot of agriculture in Kansas City, Kansas, but I do have some, and my husband does do hydroponics and works with the kids, has a little urban farm. So I actually want to revisit something that our committee tried to do last year with you. And I can't figure out if this fits somewhere else in state government, but I truly think that this fits in your department. So you tell me if it belongs somewhere else. But one of the main issues in my community is kids and older people particularly are afraid to walk in their neighborhood, afraid to walk to school because of all the loose dogs. And last year we tried to make sure that there was some state dollars available to help really get at this statewide issue of doing community spay and neuter, because that is the long-term solution in how we really solve this. And it affects so many issues with all of the loose animals. You not only have a safety and a security concern. In fact, in Kansas City recently, we've had several deaths by dog maulings, which is very unfortunate and sad. But it also helps clean our waterways. There are just so many benefits. I'm just asking from you today a commitment to help me work on this project.
Yes, I think that probably started when, we asked for the funds several years ago to give us the resources if we had a large number of dogs or cats that had to be cared for from a pet shop or from a breeder. And there was a determination to earmark some of those dollars for spay and neutering. And so we did, we kind of wait to make sure we don't have a large seizure that we have to utilize that. And then we did provide that to Kansas State to do some additional spaying and neutering. I can't tell you for sure where that occurred, but, and we could figure out what that cost per spaying is, but that, we'd have to have the additional resources to do that, but we can talk about how that.
Okay, I would appreciate that if we could explore some possible solutions. The problem with sending that money through K-State, I don't know, I guess we need to make sure that we all know how community spay and neuter works, but the K-State students cannot work on animals that are community animals and owned by other people. So we're limited in that resource by sending those dollars through K-State in that manner, because they can only spay and neuter the animals in our possession, which they have done. They have literally neutered and spayed every single one of them. But we really need to get at the community spay and neuter to solve the issue. And I know with the increase of transmittable diseases, to me, this is just something that is very proactive, that it's a good investment that we should really explore and try to make some headway on.
And thanks for that differentiation, but with what's being used now, it's animals actually that aren't owned, that may be fostered or basically adopted out. versus being owned by people who could use the resources to do the spay and neutering. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions for Secretary Beam? I have one. Does the budget that you presented, does that reflect the agency's studying to find 7.5% of efficiencies in what you presented to
does not.
us?
It does not. I'm going to look at my notes. So as I understand the request, it'd be, what would we do with the 7.5% decrease in state general funds? So I've got it here. Okay. So if you think about this, 75% of all the state general fund monies that we get goes for salary and wages. So it's really hard to not look at that factor if you're going to cut 7.5%. So that means that's about $1.3 million. So if you look at what the average salary and benefits, you can't just look at salary, but benefits, we would look at about 14.9 or 15 FTEs that would not be positions filled or would be laid off. Would be the way that I would say at this point how we'd respond to that. And many of those folks are out doing the inspections, doing work on behalf that's necessary for the customers to move forward with their products. Right now we have, I think, 6 vacancies that we're advertising for. 3 of those are water engineers that we've had really difficulty getting.
Okay, just one quick follow-up. The other 25% of SGF, what does that go towards in the agency?
Well, I'd have to look at that breakdown. You can see it as a whole, I think, by program. I thought we had a whole capture. Do we have an overall chart in this?
No. Projects that we spend this year on.
Okay, yeah, so page 2 has the, yeah, I thought we had it in here. We can get that for you because I've seen it in other documents. But it would be, there'd be some supplies and be some, cost for travel and so forth as the inspectors carry out their business.
Yeah, if you could get that for us, that would be great.
Yeah.
Any other questions of Secretary Beam or Luke for the Department of Agriculture budget for 25 and 26? Representative Carlin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of thoughts, and I'm not finding them right here in my notes. I have too many notes, but we have water engineers still in your request, and I'm not sure if that was agreed to by the Legislative Budget Committee.
So the enhancement request that we asked for was $650,000. That was not to hire engineers, that was to do contracting with engineering firms to do dam inspections.
Right, but so.
And we have I think 3 positions in water structures, but because we haven't been able to fill them, we felt like, and we did a pilot project with existing resources where we hired engineers to go out and do that work. It's a lot more expensive than it is on an individual salaried person. But that's why we asked for the enhancement.
And you weren't able to hire, so.
And having difficulty
you
to hire
had
someone.
basically had to contract to get the work done, is that correct?
To get some work done, yes.
Okay, the other question I have is the transfer, the reappropriation from, on page 2 of, let's see, it's 25. Could you explain that, please? $13 million.
Is that on water conservation?
Oh, God, I hope it's on ag.
Yeah, so
It went to the state water plan,
So
right?
anytime that there's money left over that wasn't obligated, sometimes the conservation districts don't get all of their money contracted out, or contracts are turned back because various reasons. So we'll have periodically have carryover if the legislature allows us, and then that's reinvested in those programs made available the next year.
So this money comes in after July 1st? Yes. And it needs to be spent by June 30th, right? So you have to
As long as we don't
reappropriate.
have reapportionment authority, yes. But we usually have that. It's
Yeah,
usually
okay.
for that purpose.
Is everything okay with that this year then?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions or comments about the Department of Agriculture budget? If not, we will close that hearing, and we have about 10 minutes to get started on water. Thank you, Secretary Beam and staff, for being here today.
Thanks to the Water Office for letting me go ahead of them.
So Luke, can we get a start on that budget for water, please?
Absolutely, Madam Chair. Thank you. Again, Luke Drury, Senior Fiscal Analyst, Legislative Research Department. As noted earlier, you will have a yellow sheet that also shows the governor's changes from the LBC recommendations with you all for the Water Office, and then also the State Water Plan Fund table. The first page of the budget summary is an overview, again, showing actual expenditures for 24, and then agency requests and LBC recommendations for 25 and 26. Beginning on page 2 is the beginning of the FY 2025 analysis for the Kansas Water Office. Figure number 4 is the tracking sheet, so to speak, of the summary of the budget request with those individual lines, and then those numbers then correspond with numbers for the narrative explanation down below. The agency does receive general fund. The agency also does receive state water plan fund. Item number 1, the agency had $120 in unspent general fund monies roll from 24 into 25. Item number 2, $8.1 million in unspent state water plan fund dollars rolled from 24 into 25. Item number 3 are supplemental requests. The agency did not submit any supplemental requests for 2025. At the bottom of page 2 is item number 4. That carries over onto page 3, where the majority of the narrative explanation lies. You will see an increase of $11.9 million from the water projects grant fund. As noted earlier by VJ during a conversation of the state water plan, the 2023 legislature did pass and the governor signed Senate sub for 2302. That bill can now be found in KSA, as I list there in the summary for you. That bill created this water projects grant fund. The 2024 legislature approved transfers and expenditures from that fund totaling $19.5 million. I do apologize. I do believe that says 2024 in your copy. That should be 2025. In 2024, the agency expended $1.1 million, leaving $19.9 million in the fund for 25. And that's where you'll see total funding for that totaling $31.4 million in 2025 is what is estimated to be available. There, those KSAs that I mentioned earlier, where you can see the contents of Senate sub for House Bill 2302, and I list out there from the KSA that speaks to what the projects can be used for, or excuse me, what those monies can be used for. So the agency's request does add $11.9 million there for 2025. I would note to Madam Chair that this would be related to I apologize, Madam Chair, related to the Senate sub for House Bill 2302. Item number 5 is also related to that particular piece of legislation. That legislation also created the Water Technical Assistance Fund. The agency's revised request does add $5 million from the Water Technical Assistance Fund in 2025. And it's similar to the Water Projects Grant Fund. You can see the language that Senate sub for House Bill 2302, where that can be found at. I also then list the statute that indicates how the monies can be used as well. The agency's request does add $5 million from the Water Technical Assistance Fund for other assistance. And I would note, Madam Chair, that both of these funds, the expenditures for them do come out the door as other assistance to eligible municipalities or special districts related to water. Flipping over onto page 4 is the State Water Plan Fund transfer. As discussed during the Department of Agriculture's budget, this corresponds with that particular item relating to the Kansas Reservoir Protection Initiative, a deletion of about $400,000 because the Water Office would be transferring that money from the Water Office to the Department of Agriculture in 2025. All their adjustments equal out to be an add of about $757,000. That increase is mostly attributable to the agency's estimated increases in contractual services. More specifically, the agency indicates that Republican River conservation projects are increasing and therefore increasing contractual services in 2025. Madam Chair, I can stand for questions, or I can see if we can get through 2026.
Thank you, Luke. Questions on fiscal year 2025? Let's get through 26, please. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. Beginning on page 5 is FY 2026 analysis. Again, I will point the committee to figure number 7. It shows those individual line changes, and then those numbers on the left correspond with the narrative description down below. The agency did include some enhancement requests for 2026, and you will see there on the right-hand side of figure 7 for Legislative Budget Committee. Those were not recommended by the Legislative Budget Committee. Item number 1, enhancement request funding for some new FTE positions, about $200,000 and 2 FTE positions in 2026. That's for a water resource planner and a position for water conservation support. Base salary of $75,000 per position, $100,000 combined. That remaining balance is for fringe benefit for those particular positions. Item number 2, capital outlay for those new positions. So kind of a breakout, if you will, between the positions themselves and the salaries for them. Item number 2 would be capital outlay for those new hires, essentially one-time expenditures for computers, monitors, other sort of capital outlay equipments for those new positions. Item number 3 is FEMA federal grant, $1.2 million for some estimated increases in federal dollars from FEMA. That is monies for rehabilitation of high hazard potential dams in 2026. Item number 4, State Water Plan Fund appropriations. There is an increase of about $500,000 in State Water Plan Fund in 2026. I would note, similar to the Department of Agriculture's request, that the traditional lines of appropriation are not included in the agency's request and instead would be replaced with those 5 new budget lines that are listed below. When you flip over onto page 7, beginning top of page 7 is item number 5. That's the Water Projects Grant Fund. That's a deletion of $7.5 million from the Water Projects Grant Fund for 2026. That deletion is entirely attributable to some estimated expenditures for other assistance. So that is to say, Madam Chair, that the agency estimates spending those dollars that were previously appropriated in 2025, not carrying them over into 2026. I would also note that for item number 5 and item number 6, that $7.5 million and that $2.5 million that you see down below does correspond with a governor's budget amendment that was approved by the legislature for 2025 that moved some additional state water plan fund monies from the state water plan fund to the water projects grant fund and the water technical assistance fund. So essentially that deletion, Madam Chair, is illustrating that those monies that were appropriated by the 2024 legislature are estimated to be expended and out the door in 2025 and will not carry over into 2026. Item number 7, general fund allocations, similar to what was discussed in Department of Agriculture. You got some estimated increases for group health insurance and CAPERS fringe benefit rates in 26. All other adjustments at about $900,000, roughly $1 million, all from special revenue funds. That's mostly related to contractual service expenditures, and more specifically for operation maintenance, repair, rehabilitation, and replacement costs received by the Corps of Engineers. Those can change year over year. So, Madam Chair, I would then note for the committee on the final page of the budget summary, page 9, is the standard reference table that is included in all budget summaries produced by Legislative Research. And Madam Chair, I can stand for questions if the committee has any, or Victoria Ashbury is here with us today from the Kansas Water Office and may, allowing time, I'm not sure, be able to answer any questions that you all may have.
Thank you, Luke. Questions from the committee for Luke? Okay, the time is now 3:02. I think we will stop the meeting and have the water people present tomorrow. Is that okay? Thank you, I appreciate that. So we'll continue with water tomorrow and then whatever else is on our schedule. So we are adjourned.